Aloha everyone, e koa mai. Come on in, have a seat. Aloha kākou. My name is Hina'i. I work for the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Division of State Parks. And here behind me is the valley of the state park we're in, Ahupua'a o Kahana State Park. I'm so happy to have you guys visiting from outer islands. What are some of the islands you're from? Hina'i? Wow, nice to have you here in Oahu. Big Island? Alright, I have some family there. Alright, well before we get started, it's nice to have you guys. I just want to let you know that if you have to use the restroom, you can find it outside to the left, and feel free to excuse yourself at any time. We'll be here for about 10 minutes before we start our activities in hike. You guys ready for that? Yeah, me too, alright. But first we're going to be here to talk about some very interesting things, as you can see in the table in front of me. Now, has anyone here ever heard a plant speak? Maybe? Alright. But what if I told you that a lot of our native Hawaiian plants have a story to tell? It all starts with our first people of Hawaii, our Polynesian ancestors who first came to the islands over 1,000 years ago. Now our people carefully selected each and every plant that they traveled with to come and bring it to Hawaii. Now, when you guys came over to Oahu, what did you pack inside of your backpacks, your luggage? I know you're camping out for a couple days, so what did you bring? Yeah, that's right. Some things you need are your essentials like your toothbrush. How about you? You brought a container to fill your water when you land? All right, good one. How about back there? Yeah, clothing. Things to keep you warm and dry. I know you guys are going to be hiking later today. Anyone else? Yeah, some food, some snacks, exactly. So when you guys were traveling to Oahu for this camp, you had an idea of what you're going to do, but just in case you packed, like you were saying, a warm jacket and a wet jacket, some extra food to kind of keep you satisfied throughout your travel, and maybe when you land. Now, Polynesians that first came to the islands traveled distances across the Pacific Ocean from the Marquesas Islands and Tahiti. They made their way across the ocean in centuries until they landed in Hawaii. It's here where they ended up bringing a lot of the plants and propagating or growing them in the land they cleared for farming and what we call lo'i or lo'ikalo, which is wetland farming. Now they sustainably use the land here that we're on today. And in fact, today in Kahana, the families and residents who live here today have ties to the first people of this valley. And they continue to use the land from the tops of the mountains to the fields and all the way down to the beach and even out to the ocean. This idea of sustaining and using the land in its wholesome is called an Ahupua'a. Now that's a tract of land, or as we may know, a watershed, where we manage and sustainably care for all aspects of that watershed. And it's within these areas that Hawaiians planted those crops that they carefully brought on their voyage to Hawaii. All of the plants Polynesians brought with them on their voyage to Hawaii are called canoe plants. Now these plants had many different uses, but one of the most diverse plants is the coconut, or in Hawaiian we call it niu. Now this plant could be used from the very tops where the fronds are all the way down to the trunk. From the trunk we would make pahu, or drums like this, for music, mele, or for hula, for dancing. Even for hula we would make pu niu, or a smaller type of drum, and this one would be fastened to the knee as an implement or part of dancing and music. The pu niu uses the shell of the coconut that we see here. Now this, you would originally have the white meat inside that we more commonly know that produces the coconut cream or the milk, and inside of this would have the coconut water. The shell outside could be used as bowls, but we would use an opihi shell. It's a type of shell limpet that we find in the ocean on the rocks of the crashing waves. You'd use that to scrape a lot of that meat to get it out, as it's harder and sticking to the sides of the shell here. There's other materials of the coconut that take a little more processing, and this is the husk of the coconut. This real fibrous material, if we were to pull this together and roll it together like this, we'd be able to make material that can be weaved and tied, known as cordage or aha. So this can be used to tie down your va'a, parts of your canoe, or used to lash for your hale, your house, or to make baskets. You could also use the fronds of the leaves to make baskets or also hats, like this here. You could also make mats with it. All of these materials are used, and Hawaiians were resourceful when they came to the islands. They knew not to waste anything. And as troops, as scouts, you're thinking the same way when you're going camping and hiking. You have to use what's around you. You have to know how to use the resources and then take care of them. That way, they'll be left for the next time you hike, for tomorrow, and so on. Now, as scouts, we have to be aware of what materials are available around us so that we can fish or we can hunt. And so, when you guys are out in the field hunting or fishing or camping, what would you use to make, for example, a fishing pole? A stick, yeah. What type of stick or what type of plant you think you would use? Bamboo, perfect. Bamboo is perfect. Or Hawaiian, as we know it, is ohe. It's real flexible and pliable. What about the fishing line? What would you use for a fishing line? A vine. That's a really good idea. Exactly. So Hawaiians used a lot of the plant material not just for the land, but they used it for the sea, or makai, towards the ocean. Now, some of the materials that were used are ie, or a vine that would crawl on the very tops of the mountains that we'd find. We would use that to weave into baskets that you see here. These baskets would become Hina'i, or traps that would be specific for types of fish. In this case, a hinalea. A hinalea is a wrasse. It's a small, colorful reef fish. And as they're swimming for the bait you would leave on the bottom, they would find their way in this tiny puko, or this hole on the very top. Go for the bait, but as they try to swim back out, they cannot find the exit. It's a very ingenious way to catch a specific type of fish. So all of these materials would be used from land-based plants and often weave together and can sustain the salt water, but also just being frayed from crashing waves. Specifically Upena, or nets. This was used from the aha, the cordage we were talking about, that would be woven together and fixed as often when it catches fish. But to catch the power of these fish, take a lot of time, a lot of people, a lot of material to build wide nets. And so these are some materials that Hawaiians would use, not just for the land, but for the sea as well. Niu, or coconut, is one of the most diverse canoe plants that was used by Hawaiians. It's also the most resilient. The fronds are definitely durable and flexible and the strongest of winds. And the trunk, the base, is really anchored into the even sandy soil. It finds its way, like this one behind me, on shore on its own, but also were intentionally brought for multiple purposes by the Polynesians to Hawaii. You know, a lot of the groves that are here in Hawaii have been planted hundreds of years ago. They stand 130 feet tall. These coconut trees, these niu, have really seen change over time. It's one thing that we need to not take for granted. A lot of times we look at them and people enjoy them for just the aesthetic of Hawaii, but there's so much more meaning to this plant than that. These plants are very important to not just provide material and use and food, but because the idea that the fruit is like a human, where it takes 9 months to develop an actual coconut, just like it takes 9 months to develop a child. And like how we take care of our children or your brothers and little baby sisters, we should too take care of these plants just the same. Mahalo for being attentive listeners. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Today we learned a lot about the Polynesian plants that were brought to Hawaii and used by Hawaiians. We learned that many of them had different uses, but that there's a deeper connection that Hawaiians had with these plants. I hope when you go home, take a listen to what the plants had to say. Sometimes there's a story they want to tell, and you might be part of it. Aloha. Ahuiho.